In the summer of 1965, the Pacific Ocean took Ezra Hunt. That was the official conclusion. That was what the Coast Guard's report said when the 3-day search was suspended off the north shore of Oahu. What Officer Raymond Kealoha of the Honolulu Police Department recorded in the case file, and what the Hunt family was told in the careful language that investigators use when the news cannot be improved by any choice of words. The ocean had taken him. In that stretch of the North Shore where the current ran unpredictably and where the surf had claimed other children before, it had taken a 6-year-old boy on the 4th of July in 1965 and had not given him back. 61 years later, it gave him back, or rather, it had given him back on the same day it took him. To a Japanese-American fisherman on a boat 60 miles away off the coast of Kauai, who pulled an unconscious child from the water and saved his life, and spent the following weeks trying to find the boy's family through every channel available to him on his island. By the time anyone connected those two facts, a presumed drowned child in a closed Oahu case file and a rescued boy growing up on a different island, 61 years had passed. The boy was 67 years old. He had children. He had grandchildren. He had spent his entire adult life as a fisherman on the same island where the man who saved him had once worked. What connected the two stories was a retired 4th-grade teacher who reads too many cold case files and writes things down. This is Ezra's story, and to understand it fully, you have to understand something about islands, the distances between them, and the particular way the truth can survive 61 years of water. The North Shore of Oahu in 1965 was not yet what it would become. The surf contests that would later make Halewa famous around the world were still years away, and the pineapple fields that ran between the Waianae Mountains and the coast were very much in operation. Long green rows visible from the 2-lane road, the dole plant's sweetness carried on the trade winds some mornings, the land organized by the plantation economy that had shaped this part of the island for 60 years. It was a working coast, not a tourist one. The people who lived there tended to have been there for a generation or more, and they tended to know each other in the way that working communities know each other. By name, by trade, by which family had been in the valley longest. Walter Hunt had come to Hawaii from California in 1956, taken work at the Dole plant, and met Grace Kamakoa at a church picnic in Waialua in 1957. Grace was part Hawaiian. Her mother's family had been on the North Shore for 4 generations, and she had, in Walter's description of the meeting years later, a way of making wherever she was standing feel like the center of something important. They married in 1958. Ezra was born in 1959. Clara in 1960. Grace was the one who put Hawaii into them both. She taught them words in Hawaiian that the public schools had stopped teaching. She kept a small garden of native plants along the back of the house and could name each one and tell you what her grandmother had used it for. She said ono, the Hawaiian word for delicious, for good, for yes, this is the right thing, the way mainland people say beautiful, as a general affirmation that the world was currently working as it should. Ezra had adopted the word with complete conviction. He applied it to sunsets, to breakfast, to the green plastic truck he refused to leave at home, to the ocean on mornings when the water was flat and clear. He was 6 years old and had been swimming since he was 4. Grace had taught him herself, in the shallows behind a neighbor's house, patient, steady, holding him up until he stopped asking her to. By the summer of 1965, he was comfortable in the water in a way that Grace sometimes found reassuring and sometimes stood near. He knew the ocean the way children who grow up beside it know it, not as danger, but as fact, as the largest given of his world, as the thing that was always there and always moving and always in his experience, returned you to the shore. He had a toy ukulele he could not play. He dragged it from room to room and occasionally struck it with the flat of his hand in what he appeared to consider a musical gesture. Grace had stopped explaining the instrument. She let him carry it. He was supposed to start first grade in September. The last ordinary morning the Hunt family ever had was July 4th, 1965. 4th of July on the north shore of Oahu meant the beach. It meant a community gathering that had been happening in some form since before statehood. Families from Halewa and Waialua and the surrounding neighborhoods, folding tables set up on the sand, food brought in covered dishes and foil pans, children in the water all afternoon while the adults talked in the shifting light. Walter had the day off. Grace had packed food the night before. Ezra asked at breakfast whether the fireworks would be over the water. She told him yes. By 11 in the morning, both children were in the surf with the other neighborhood children who had gathered near the Hunts area of the beach. Grace was watching from the sand, in conversation with a neighbor, her eyes going to the water regularly the way a parent's eyes go to the water. Clara was in the shallows, where the waves broke small. Ezra was further out than he was supposed to be. At approximately 1:45 in the afternoon, Grace looks up. She counts the children in the water. She counts again. She stands. She walks to the water's edge and calls Ezra's name in the specific tone that children recognize as the one that means, "Come here now, not in a moment, not when you're done. Now, the surf comes back." The children nearby are not Ezra. She calls again, louder. She is in the water before anyone on the beach fully understands what is happening. The Coast Guard was called at 2:15 in the afternoon. 2 boats were searching the water off the north shore within the hour. Walter arrived at the beach at 2:40, reached by phone at a neighbor's house he had stepped away to visit. Clara was taken to a neighbor's car and stayed there. She was 5 years old and did not fully understand what was happening and would spend the next 60 years understanding it more and more. The search ran for 3 days. The currents off that stretch of shore were mapped and followed. Divers went down in the areas where the current would have carried a child his size and weight. Nothing was found. On July 9, 1965, the Coast Guard suspended the active search. On September 3, 1965, the Honolulu Police Department reclassified the case of Ezra Hunt from missing to presumed death by drowning. The absence of a recovered body was noted as unusual, but not without precedent in the waters off the North Shore. Officer Raymond Kealoha filed an internal dissent. He believed the case should remain formally open as missing rather than closed as presumed dead. But the reclassification was approved by his captain. Ezra was not in the water off the North Shore. He was 60 miles away, on Kauai, recovering from hypothermia in a house in Kepa, where a fisherman had brought him home because the ocean had given him somewhere to bring him. Toshio Yamamoto was 44 years old in the summer of 1965, a Japanese-American fisherman from Kepa who had served with the 442nd Infantry Regiment during World War II, and come home to the island where his parents had settled before him to do the work he had always intended to do. Fish the waters he knew and raise the sons he had. He went out before dawn on the morning of July 4th. He and his deckhand found the child at approximately 8:30 in the morning, floating face down in the water approximately a mile off the Kauai coastline, carried through the night by a current that had moved him from Oahu in the hours after he went under. Toshio pulled him from the water. The boy was alive. His wife Sachiko had trained as a nurse before their children were born, and she worked on the child for the better part of an hour after Toshio brought him home. By afternoon, the boy was breathing steadily. By evening, he was awake. He could say his first name. He could say mama. He could say the word ono, which made Sachiko smile, because it was a word she knew. He could not say his family's last name or tell them where he lived. He was 6 years old. He had been in the open ocean for hours, and the specific information that would have connected him to a case on another island was not accessible to him the way it was not accessible to most 6-year-olds in a strange house on a different island, who wanted, more than anything, their mother. Toshio went to the Kappa harbor master the following morning and filed a report of a child recovered from the water. The harbor master checked available missing persons listings, which did not include the Hunt case. Because the Hunt case was on Oahu, under a different police jurisdiction, and because the mechanism by which a case on one island reached the records office of another in 1965 was neither fast nor, as it turned out, sufficient. The Oahu case would be reclassified as a presumed drowning within 2 months. By then, no missing child named Ezra was appearing on any list available in Kappa. Toshio contacted the Kappa police. He asked at the Catholic Church, where the community network extended broadly. Several families made inquiries of relatives on Oahu. Nothing came back. There was no malice in any of this. There was only the gap between two islands and the limitations of what was possible in 1965 for a man who had found a child and was trying, without the tools to do it adequately, to find where the child had come from. The Yamamoto's own sons were grown. They raised Ezra as a late addition to their family, with the thoroughness of people who have been given something unexpected and decide completely to accept it. They kept his name. They told him, when he was old enough to understand, that they had found him in the water and had not been able to find his family, and had loved him in the place of that family as well as they knew how. Officer Kealoha on Oahu continued pressing, through informal channels, for the Hunt case to be reconsidered. He retired in 1988. He died in 2002, the case unresolved, his dissent still in the file. Walter Hunt died in 1981 at 53 of a heart attack. He had spent 16 years believing his son had drowned, and he died believing it, because the record said so, and because the alternative, that Ezra had been alive somewhere all along, was something the official record had not given him a reason to hold. Grace was different. Grace Hunt never fully accepted the reclassification. She said, from the week the Coast Guard suspended the search, that no body had been found, and therefore no conclusion had been reached, and therefore there was still something that needed answering. She said this to Walter, who could not live inside that possibility the way she could. She said it to the Honolulu Police Department in 1973, when she requested the case be reopened, and was told there was nothing to reopen. She said it to Clara, who grew up with her brother's absence as a permanent feature of the house, his school portrait on the wall through 4 decades of Christmases that did not include him. His room kept as it was until Grace moved to a smaller apartment in the late 1980s. In the spring of 2016, a woman from a missing children's advocacy group visited Grace's building and explained the Hawaii Attorney General's Cold Case DINA initiative, a program that collected reference samples from families of unresolved missing and presumed dead cases, building a database in the hope that future identifications might run against it. Grace Kamakoa Hunt was 89 years old. She said yes before the woman finished explaining. Grace died in March of 2018, at 91. She had spent 53 years saying the ocean had not taken everything. If Ezra's story found you today, subscribe. There are more families like Grace's, and they deserve to be followed. Back to Ezra. Clara Hunt is 65 years old and lives in Kaneohe on the windward side of Oahu. She has a daughter and 2 grandchildren. She was 5 years old when her brother disappeared, and she has one memory of him that she has carried ever since. Him standing knee-deep in the surf on some earlier beach day, pointing at something on the horizon, turning back to look at her with a face of total delight at whatever he had seen. She does not know what he was pointing at. She never asked. She has spent 60 years wishing she had. She submitted her own DINA to the Hawaii Ag's Cold Case Initiative in 2020. She did it because Grace had submitted hers in 2016, and because Clara had finally reached the age at which she believed her mother completely. 60 miles away on Kauai, Ezra Yamamoto, 61 years old, fishing out of Kappa, grandfather of 3, had spent years making occasional, inconclusive attempts to research his origins. He knew what the Yamamotos had told him, that he had been found in the ocean as a young child, that his first name was Ezra, that they had tried to find where he came from. He did not know the name Hunt. He did not know about Oahu. He had searched, without that name, and found nothing. Helen Akana is 72 years old, retired from 31 years of teaching 4th grade in Kappa, Kauai. She has been running a blog about Hawaiian cold cases since 2015, when she read about the resolution of a long unsolved Maui disappearance, and understood that there were many more like it, and that almost none of them were being told. She does not consider herself an investigator. She considers herself someone who reads carefully and remembers what she has read. In the spring of 2023, she comes across an article in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser about the Hawaii Ag's Cold Case DINA initiative, a feature that mentions several participating families by name, including the family of one Ezra Hunt, presumed drowned, 1965, North Shore. She reads the article. She keeps it. She goes back through 8 years of notes and archived local news, looking for something she believes she has read before without knowing what to do with it. She finds it in a 1998 feature from the Garden Island, Kauai's community newspaper, a piece about longtime Kappa fishing families that includes a brief passage about one Ezra Yamamoto, then 40 years old, who had been found in the ocean as a child of approximately 6 by his adoptive father, Toshio Yamamoto, who had raised him on the island. She reads the Star-Advertiser piece about the Hunt case. She reads the Garden Island piece about the Yamamoto rescue. She writes down the name Ezra. She writes down the age 6. She writes down 1965 and counts the years. Then she contacts the Hawaii Department of Attorney General's Cold Case Unit and asks, carefully, whether anyone has looked at these 2 stories in connection with each other. Detective Leilani Kahananui of the Cold Case Unit had been working Clara Hunt's DINA file since 2021 as one of 63 open presumed drowning cases from before 1975 that the unit was systematically reviewing. She received Helen Akana's email on a Tuesday afternoon in May of 2023. She read it twice. She checked the dates. She did the arithmetic. Then she began making calls to Kauai. Ezra Yamamoto, 64 years old, fishing out of Kappa, was reached by Detective Kahananui in July of 2023. She explained what had been found and what she was asking. He agreed to participate without hesitation. He said he had been waiting for this call, more or less, for 40 years. His DINA sample was submitted in August of 2023. The comparison ran against both Grace Hunt's 2016 reference sample and Clara Hunt's 2020 submission, which were already in the initiative's database. The results came back in April of 2025. Detective Kahananui called Clara Hunt on a Saturday morning. She gave Clara the match probability. She gave her the name. She told her that her brother was alive and 66 years old and lived on Kauai and had spent his life fishing, the same as the man who had saved him. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother knew." She said it the way you say something you have been waiting 60 years to say out loud. Toshio Yamamoto had been, by every account available to Detective Kahananui's investigation, a man of particular uprightness. His neighbors in Kappa, the veterans from the 442nd who stayed in correspondence for decades, the families whose children had known his. He had served in a regiment that proved something about what a person was willing to endure for a country that had not always treated him with corresponding regard. He had come home and fished and raised his family, and, when the ocean gave him an unexpected child, had raised that child too with the same steadiness he applied to everything else. He had tried to find the boy's origins. He had not been able to. The Kappa harbor master's records from the summer of 1965, reviewed by investigators, confirmed that Toshio had filed an inquiry in July and followed up in August of that year. The gap between those efforts and the Hunt family in Oahu was not negligence. It was geography and timing and the particular limitations of what could move between islands in 1965 without the infrastructure that did not yet exist. Toshio's biological sons, both in their 60s and 70s now, living on Oahu and in California, participated in the investigation with full cooperation, and something one of them described to Detective Kahananui as relief. They had grown up knowing their youngest brother had come from the ocean. They had always wondered what ocean, and from where. The community of Halewa on the north shore of Oahu received the news in the spring of 2025 with the particular texture of grief that arrives when a mourning is found to have been incomplete. Several of Grace Hunt's former neighbors reached out to Clara directly. Several of them said versions of the same thing: she was right. She said so for 50 years, and she was right. Ezra Hunt flew to Oahu for the first time in his adult life in June of 2025. He was 66 years old. He stood on the beach at Halewa on a June morning, the trade winds in the ironwood trees, the water the same color it had been on the morning of July 4th, 1965, and he looked at the ocean that had carried him away from this shore as a child and delivered him, by accident and geography and the actions of a good man with a boat. Somewhere he was loved. Clara was waiting at the edge of the parking lot. She had one memory of her brother, 60 years old and intact, him standing knee-deep in the surf, pointing at something on the horizon. She recognized him before he saw her. She walked forward first. The case of Ezra Hunt was officially closed by the Hawaii Department of Attorney General on September 9, 2025, 60 years, 2 months, and 5 days after Officer Raymond Kealoha filed his dissent in the original case file. There is a photograph of Ezra Hunt from the summer of 1964, taken at a family gathering in the backyard of the house in Halewa. He is 5 years old, 1 year before he disappeared, and he is standing at the edge of a table of food with a piece of pineapple in one hand and an expression of complete satisfaction on his face. The face of a child who has found exactly what he was looking for and is eating it and considers the situation fully resolved. His hair is going sideways in the trade wind. He is wearing a shirt with a pattern of fish on it that Grace made herself. Clara has kept this photograph for 60 years. She gave Ezra a copy of it in June of 2025, on the beach where he was last seen, 60 years after she last saw him. Ezra Hunt is 67 years old. He still lives in Kappa. He still fishes. His 3 grandchildren have been introduced to their grandfather's sister, and to her daughter, and to her grandchildren. 2 extended family trees that did not know the other existed, reorganizing themselves around a truth that arrived 61 years late and is no less true for it. Grace Hunt died in 2018 not knowing. She spent 53 years saying that the ocean had not taken everything, and she was right. and she did not live to find out she was right. The DNA sample she gave in 2016, 2 years before she died, was one of the 2 samples that the confirmation ran against. She is part of how this resolved, even from the distance of 7 years. What she had was 53 years of being right, in a way that no official record was willing to confirm for her. And she left the door open, a cheek swab in 2016, entered into a database she would never see return a result, and it was her son who walked through it. Cases like Ezra's leave questions that the resolution doesn't close. What do we owe to families who are handed a wrong conclusion by institutions they trusted, and to the parents, like Grace, who spend decades saying so and are not believed until after they are gone? What name do we give to what Toshio Yamamoto did? A man who saved a child's life and could not return him, and raised him in his place without malice, without knowing the price of it to a family on another island? And what does it mean to be a person who has always known he came from the ocean, and who finally, at 67, knows which shore? Leave those questions in the comments. Tell us what part of Ezra's story stayed with you. Justice came for Ezra Hunt after 61 years, through a retired schoolteacher who read 2 stories and recognized them as one, and through a mother who left a door open in 2016 that her son walked through 9 years later. Subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More solved cold cases are in the description. Ezra Hunt was 6 years old when the Pacific took him. He is 67 years old now. The Pacific gave him back,